Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7. Putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
National Folk Festival is coming to Salisbury. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Starting in 2018, the city of Salisbury will be hosting the National Folk Festival for the next 3 years. It's a national traveling celebration of the nation's heritage. It includes music, dance, and traditional arts and culture. The event has drawn as many as 150,000 people and has generated as much as $30 million a year in economic activity. It's sponsored by the National Council for Traditional Arts, a nonprofit that has taken the event from Chattanooga and Nashville to Richmond and Greensboro since 1934. Talk about the event and its rich history. On our studio this morning is Julia Olin. She's Executive Director of the National Council that puts on the festival, and also Laura Bottinelli, Executive Director of Salisbury University's Ward Museum of Wildfowl Art. And welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Julie, I want to start with you a little and ask you what attracted the festival to Salisbury in this area?
Well, the festival is awarded to prospective host cities by, it's a competition, a national competition. And cities from around the country apply. And, well, Salisbury, at this particular juncture in its history, long history, really has a very special energy that feels like it's a place that's very alive, it's changing, and it just seemed like the right time to bring an event like the National to this city.
So is it, what kinds of, are other institutions going to be involved, like Salisbury University and so on? What's the situation with that?
It's a huge partnership. Probably most of the cultural and educational and of course the city entities will be involved in partnering to produce this festival.
How important is that?
It's very important, and that's one of the things we were looking for, is sort of a broad enthusiasm and engagement across the community.
And Laura, so you were involved in some of this, I hear. How did all this come about?
Well, I've known Julia for a little while now, for about 15 years through the Maryland Traditions program. And every 3 years they look for a new host city for the Nationals. And so in that time with Julia, it's come up, do you think anyone on the Eastern Shore might be up for submitting an application? And so finally, City of Salisbury, through Jake Day's leadership, mustered the application, and we submitted it through the competitive process, and hey, look at us here. We're going to have a National Folk Festival in a couple weeks next year.
So what kind of things do we expect to then to see? What kinds of performances, what kind of traditions are generally seen? And
Well, just about every cultural community in the United States will be represented. It's the event is very diverse, so it will be everything from Appalachian ballad singing to salsa music from New York City, all sorts of traditional craft, bluegrass, blues, arts that represent the Asian community and the African diaspora community. Everything that's in our nation is going to be featured at this festival.
anything, by the way, from the Eastern Shore? Do we know?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Of course. There's a special area of the festival that is devoted exclusively to the culture of the host region and state. And so definitely the Eastern culture of the Eastern Shore is going to be feature prominently in the very first festival especially.
Mm-hmm. And we're excited to work with the festival in helping to identify a lot of those close cultural partnerships we have with traditional artists and folks that have been involved with many of the other cultural research on the shore related to the lifeways and occupations of Delmarva.
So, I mean, Laura, so what kinds of things do you think we might see from the shore? I mean, obviously, I'm sure we're going to have duck carving. I'm sure that's there, right?
I think we might be able to
Let's
arrange to
sneak
have a
that in.
decoy maker exhibiting his or her talents. But if you think, just a couple weeks ago, we hosted the Delmarva Festival at the Ward Museum. And so we had everything from a lot of things that were dealing with the maritime culture. So people from Smith Island, whether they were demonstrating Smith Island cake or doing crab picking or oyster shucking. There's a very obviously rich trapping traditions of the Eastern Shore. You think about gospel music, and you think about singing and praying bands, which is a very important gospel tradition, has a very strong Eastern Shore roots. So between music and material culture, there'll be a lot of the shore being able to see themselves on this national stage.
So I want to look at give us a sense about the history of this, because I understand it began, I guess, about 1934, although I guess there was one event in 1933, and a woman named Sarah Gertrude Knott. What role did she play in it? How did this come about?
The festival was first presented in 1934 in St. Louis. The organization, then called the National Folk Festival Association, was founded in 1933 by Sarah Gertrude Knott, a native Kentuckian who was very involved in the, it was the Depression, a lot of public programs. She was involved in doing some community organizing, working with poorer and immigrant communities in St. Louis. And she discovered that even more than the dramatic presentations that they were organizing, that the folks loved they would organize talent shows, and the folks loved to hear the music from the Ozarks or polka from the German polka. And so she got the idea, this like, people love their own cultures. Why don't we create an event that brings everybody together, and it becomes the showcase of American culture in all its many forms?
And my understanding is she didn't have any training in particular at all. She just sort of ran with this thing.
She did. Her training was not particularly music, but she really had some charisma and a knack, because she brought together the most prominent folklorists, ethnomusicologists, and other cultural specialists of her day to form the board of this festival and to stay with it for many, many years.
And I guess the First Lady at the time, Eleanor Roosevelt, also became involved with it.
She did. It was the festival traveled around the country, and from 1938 to 1942, it was actually presented in Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., and Eleanor Roosevelt served as honorary chair of the festival.
This would seem to be a time that particularly in the Depression, there were a lot of folks who actually went out almost to discover America. I mean, I think about the famous photographs.
Exactly.
There were oral histories already in progress. I mean, this seemed to be a very fervent time in terms of the country trying to know itself.
Exactly, that's very true. And it was a time of the rediscovery of the sort of genius of the American people, and the traditions that they kept and the arts that they made that were not of the conservatory but generative, growing out of the experiences that people had in their lives.
I also understand that I think it was 1938, Father of the Blues, W.C. Handy's first appearance and a desegregated appearance.
First appearance on the desegregated stage was at the 1938 National Folk Festival at Constitution Hall, which was run by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and at that time strictly segregated. Now, how Ms. Knott and her cohorts got away with this, no one is ever quite sure, but they regularly presented black and white performers at the National Folk Festival over those years. In 1938, if you'll remember, this was the year before Marian Anderson was famously not allowed to sing at Constitution Hall, and Eleanor Roosevelt resigned from the Daughters of the American Revolution over that. So how the National Folk Festival managed to, I guess they just ignored it.
So the history. I mean, there's a. I guess the institution goes on, and but there's a discussion about how it was revitalized in 1970. What's the history there?
Well, Sarah had stayed at the helm for all those many decades and was getting up in years, and the country was changing, as Bob Dylan said. The times were changing, and the nature of festival work was changing, and the National had not really moved on with the times, and so it was in need of reinvigoration, and that came about through a collaboration with the National Park Service, and some new folks came in, became involved with the programming, and the festival started a tenure at Wolf Trap Performing Arts Park that lasted for 11 years. And the 70s was really an exciting time. There were so many traditions, vernacular traditions, that were coming out of different regions of the country. I mean, we were hearing Cajun music, real Cajun music for the first time. All sorts of blues artists that recorded in the 1920s were being rediscovered and brought to the national stage. So it was an exciting time where a new generation of younger Americans, now my age, were getting in touch with the country's culture. And so the National was really a part of that. It became a part of that in the 70s.
Because one of the things that struck me, particularly in the 1960s, you had this sort of rediscovering of the country's folk music history and its legends and so on. People, for instance, Pete Seeger, and of course so on and so forth. It seems that a lot of that sort of the recognition that we were this multicultural, or at least trending kind of country.
Yes, and of course those folks that were at the grassroots, that were of these cultural communities, actually the originators of the art forms, were the ones that inspired the entire folk revival of the 60s and 70s.
So, and then I guess the National Folk Festival, it returns to the road, I think, in the early 80s. Is that right?
It did. In its early years, it traveled almost every year, tenuring from time to time in St. Louis for multiple years, or D.C. Went back on the road. Actually, the Filing Center at Wolf Trap Performing Arts Park burned down for the second time in 1982. Which was a major venue as part of the festival, but it was the catalyst for a decision or an idea that had been simmering in the organization about taking the show back on the road, and that began in 1983. The festival once again began to travel on a regular basis.
So as you go out into these various communities from city to city, obviously you stay about 3 years, I guess it is. So what kind of response do you get? And is there a sense in these individual cities that they begin to sort of know each other again? I mean, because you bring all these people. I mean, we tend to sort of get used to the idea, well, there are these people out there, there's our neighbors, but we don't get outside of the bubbles that were of our own friendship. Is a sense of these cities beginning to maybe recognize some traditions that they didn't realize or maybe didn't appreciate?
I think the festival actually is a mind-blowing experience. I mean, I've been doing this work for many decades, and it still blows my mind how amazing the country is, how amazing the traditions are, how there are things in every nook and cranny of the country that you just didn't know about. Well, the thing about the festival is that it's all there all at once, and that's what's so amazing about it. Is like, from a small rural place, from the heart of an inner city, all these different cultural expressions are there. The festival now travels, as you know, every fourth year it relocates, so it's a 3-year stay in each community. And we're really trying to get at the best of the nation, the best of the host community and the region, and put these things all together in one event. And I think that the event is transformative. One, it truly takes everybody in the village to put it on,
right.
So everybody owns it. But it becomes a source of great pride as well as a truly delightful experience.
What do you think was the most unique venue you think you've been at, or that you're aware of, or the special in terms of cities or areas?
Well,
I mean, not to put you on the spot of favoring one or the other, but
you're like asking me to choose amongst my best friends and say which one is my favorite, because American communities, and this is endlessly fascinating to me, they're as different as individual people. Each community has its own unique personality as a place. And so we're not only meeting lots of individual people, we're discovering these personalities that each community has. Butte, Montana is very different from Salisbury, Maryland. And Bangor, Maine is very different from Richmond, Virginia. So, it's something.
So we're living now in a what appears to be, at least in terms of awareness, much more aware of a multicultural country. And
yes.
we've seen, obviously, the demographics are changing rather rapidly. We see a
Yes.
rising Hispanic community and so on. How do you see the festival reacting or playing into those changes that we're now seeing? I mean, do you see it as facilitating that change in terms of understanding each other? How do you see the festival fitting into what we see as a changing landscape of America?
I see the festival as reflective, and it's sort of at any given time as if we could hold this giant mirror up to ourselves and say, who are we? Who are we as Americans? And that is constantly changing, and the festival has changed with the country. In other words, today, urban arts are certainly a part of the things that you would experience at a national festival. Hip-hop arts are actually 50 years old now, if you can imagine that. But in 1934, we certainly weren't presenting hip-hop arts, hadn't even been created in the neighborhoods or street corners of American cities.
Is part of this, by the way, this effort to also preserve the rich history? I know that Laura is involved in doing a lot of that, trying to preserve as well as expose the culture and the arts of America.
Well, people who practice traditions or tradition bearers, they're the ones that perpetuate and preserve. I think the festival's role is to bring these beautiful traditions to broader attention and celebrate them as as American treasures, really, and in that way to foster interest and to give opportunity to the artists that practice them. So we can't do it all, but we're doing our part.
So, Laura, how do you see us fitting into all of this over the next? Are we gonna get to know ourselves? You think in the next 3 years, as I think I've suggested here.
Well, I think so, because we're gonna have to work together pretty closely.
We're engaged.
That's right. I mean, just through the process of getting the application together and making our presentations, there's new partnerships that have already started to form in the city just from getting people in the room who maybe haven't been in the same room together for a couple of years. I know just having Salisbury University students, there's this interest in how the economic impact of this festival can be tracked and monitored and be a teaching tool for university students. So there's a lot of really cool things going. And so if the business community is thinking about getting to know itself as it relates to this festival, I just can't wait to see some of that economic impact data that the students get. But how is it, like 800 volunteers that need to be pulled together? So if you're listening to this, it's going to be our local United Way chapter that helps organize all those volunteers. So if you want to be part of this, holding this giant mirror up to ourselves, sign up at the United Way.
Yeah, it's a big mirror.
It's heavy. But yes.
So, to you, Laura, it seems as if, and Julia sort of alluded to this, is that there seems to be a lot of activity, at least as I can see, going on in terms of Salisbury. Not to boast or anything like that, but you Third Friday and a whole slew of other things. There seems to be, and if you drive through downtown, I'm assuming downtown's going to be done by the time, right? By the time this gets off.
Partially, anyway.
Hopefully,
Yeah, there's
so.
definitely a crackle everywhere, every corner. Everything's kind of popping at the same time. It's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, do you see this as part of that of a trend for the city? Because I mean, I will tell you that when I got here 10 years ago, not a lot. There was a lot of infighting. Of course, we all know about that, but there wasn't a lot of movement forward.
It's changing. It's changed. I mean, part of the reason that we were successful in our application for this event was that we had proved that our city was capable and worthy and able to make this type of stretch to achieve an event of this size. Really, it's that everyone is really complimentary right now to the overall ambition to improve the city, raise the profile, raise the morale, kind of just make this a better place to live, work, and play. And it feels different. I've been here for that long, and it's under the leadership of Jake Day and a lot of our other county and local leaders. It is a different place.
So, Julie, so what kinds of things do you think we should expect to see? I mean, obviously you haven't lined up the acts yet, but
No, not yet.
any inklings here about what kinds of things we'll see? Like obviously a lot of from the Eastern Shore, I guess, as Laura's mentioned, but outside as well. I mean, urban things, that kind of thing. What do you think we're going to see here, or just? And how many acts? I mean, I guess there's what? There's six, what number of stages?
6 to 7 stages, continuously operating. There'll be a festival marketplace that will be handcrafted, items exclusively made in the state of Maryland, so it's showcasing again an aspect of Maryland culture. There'll be a family area. There will be the Folklife Maryland Traditions area that will there will be a huge dance pavilion that is nothing but dance groups of all different types. So this is for participatory dancing, not to watch, but to do.
I have to actually do it, you mean?
You will, we'll offer a
maybe
few
Laura
lessons
does. I don't
for
know.
those who are impaired. Continuous activity, but it'll be everything from blues to bluegrass to mariachi to Irish, on and on and on. Just every conceivable cowboy music, tambourine music, as well as material culture, crafts demonstrations, and foodways and things like that.
So I guess in some ways, particularly for the folks on the Eastern Shore, they'll be able to see maybe a piece of the rest of the country that maybe they haven't seen before. I know that bridge gets kind of long there, but
They will. There will be some surprises, definitely.
Yeah. So Laura, how do you think people are going to be reacting? I mean, has there been some initial involvement there? What kind of feedback you get?
I think people are just really excited and trying to figure out how in the heck are we going to fit all these people into our city. It's going to be a really full and vibrant festival scene, and the downtown has got a great palette for it. And I know that Julia's team at NCTA can put on like the highest production quality events in the country. I mean, they have gotten awards on this. It's just they put on the National Heritage Award each year for the National Endowment for the Arts. I mean, a very prestigious organization that's going to be bringing their talent to our region. So not only great musicians, great artists, but just like the highest caliber of performance. And it's going to be a very, very exciting time to be an event in Salisbury.
By the way, is this going to be like spread out throughout the city, or how? Do we have any sense about the landscape yet?
Well, the general footprint will be walkable, and it'll be probably downtown.
Okay, principally downtown. Okay.
Yeah, but it certainly has to be spread out because you know.
There's 6 venues. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it really will be the best of the best. These artists, you may not know their name, but they will be the very best at what they do.
Well, we'll look forward to this, and we've been talking to Julia Olin. She is the executive director of Salisbury. She is the executive director of the National Council for Traditional Arts, and Laura Bottinelli, who is the executive director of the Salisbury University's Ward Museum of Wildfowl Art. And we appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Frank. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. For the Delmarva Today schedule, visit pac14.org or view the latest issue of the Daily Times.